And now, if you have questions for any of the panel, and especially for our distinguished guest, Carmen Tshiteem, please come forward to the microphone and ask those questions.
I have a question about people in poverty in the U.S. Traveling around the world, in Mexico, Africa, China, what I discovered in being humble and trying to interact even without language access is that many of those people really were happy with apparently nothing relative to us. Whereas in the U.S., I think that is lacking, and I'm wondering if you have any insight into how that might be part of this program and might change. And it's a big question, but anyway, that's it.
I do want to say something to that. Oops, I have to stand up. That has to do so much with the gap between the rich and the poor. And that what we have here, as you know, is a huge gap. And if you're a culture that thinks your security is money and possessions, then you don't turn to other people for your security. And that's what they have when they, in those countries.
Should I say? Sure. Just to share our experience, I think, for instance, Bhutan, we have quite high levels of poverty. 1 out of every person is actually living on less than $1 a day, literally. So poverty levels are high. Yet when we had a census in 2005, and so that goes to every citizen. So we added this one last question at the end of the population and housing census: are you happy? With 2 possible answers of yes and no. And actually we got 3 responses. No, I'm not happy, yes, I'm happy, and yes, I'm very happy. And 97% were happy. So given the high levels of poverty, what I deduce, I infer is because of our outlook. Is because material development is very important for the material part of human. For the spiritual part of human, you require these other skills, like the community, like doing some meditation, your spiritual practice. And I think maybe our people have that. So even though materially they're quite deprived, yet overall their outlook in life was very good. So coming back to your question, I think the challenge is how do we get a system, say particularly in terms of our education system, shifting from what we have just now, which is so job and salary oriented, to an education system that gives you a very good sense of your enlightened self-interest, and also a good skill that gives you very good income and hopefully adds meaning to your life. And I
experience that surely money and happiness are really interwoven, and you can't have happiness without it, and yet all the evidence is really to the contrary. So even as we ourselves decline in money, what's interesting is the last 2 years with the recession as it has been, the level of well-being in the American public has actually gone up quite a lot. People spend a lot more time with their family, they're riding bikes more, they're working out more, even as money has gone down. So it's an interesting thing to think about. Can we even have permission to be happy when maybe we don't have so much money anymore? So
we don't want to make light of poverty and of all of those kind of things and about the difference. In fact, I think the struggle for happiness and the ideas around GNH are that why should we be spending so much time giving so many tax cuts to the richest people and all of that to have them get richer and richer and richer, when in fact that doesn't prove to make people happier, and when it only makes the gap greater between rich and poor and makes it harder for those at the bottom end. So I think equality is a huge part of the campaign for happiness, and we're not going to forget that. Next question.
Yeah, my question is about how you go about changing policies when the United States is so closely tied to corporations, and really the agenda we're following is one of the ruling class, which I think is very different from other countries that might be more successful doing this. Are there examples of how you think those policies can be changed? You know, things like leisure time, and I think a lot of those are things that corporate money would go against fighting.
Vicki, you want to take it?
No, I think John, you should talk about that. Have Alan Grayson speak.
Well, there's nothing that we can do, except we just have to do it. We have to stand up for these things and work as hard as we can. The point is well taken. Many of our companies will resist these kinds of positive changes. Not all of them. We have some very enlightened companies as well. Some of them are obviously here in this building and are part of this conference. But we do have some that will oppose these kinds of changes. They don't want to slow down. They don't want to reduce the profits at all. And it's up to us to tell our government that, we want to be represented and we don't want those folks to call all the shots. There's really no other answer.
Was it Ben Bernanke that came out recently and said, it was Bernanke, right? That New York Times article? Was it New York Times? Anyway, I believe it was Bernanke that said that it's beginning to be obvious that GNP does not account for all of the important things in life and that maybe we should have alternative economic indicators. And in fact, the Obama administration has a quiet little think tank that they have now assigned to begin looking into alternative economic indicators in place right now.
One other thing is that the health care bill, which was passed recently, contained actually one provision appropriating $70 million for a new national key indicator system for the United States as an alternative to GDP. Parts of that system will be up and running this summer. The website is called stateoftheusa.org. You'll be able to see that. I've seen some of the prototypes. This is going to be a pretty terrific system, giving us all kinds of indicators aside from GDP to assess how we're doing, including subjective indicators about happiness.
Thank you. I'm actually not from Seattle. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, but I'm very interested in this for our city. But I think one of the, to me it's really clear, one of the reasons you can point to in the West and the U.S. that we're unhappy as opposed to happy is that we get 10,000 messages a day telling us that we're unhappy. And you're unhappy, you're unhappy, you're unhappy, you're unhappy, you're unhappy, here by this you'll be happy, here by this you'll be happy, here by this you're unhappy, you're unhappy, you're unhappy, you're happy, you're unhappy, you're unhappy, you're unhappy. So, as we begin to, and I think when you think about other cultures that are not as affluent as ours, they are beginning to be marketed to in that same way, and they're starting to feel those same pressures and beliefs of those messages that they're unhappy, they're unhappy, they're unhappy, they're unhappy. So I think one thing that as we're beginning to measure this in our cities, because just like the Copenhagen, the 10-10, it's not going to happen at the national and international level, but the cities can begin to move forward. And what that does, what starts to happen there is it starts to change marketplaces as well. I think it starts to change those marketplaces. So I just wanted to, less of a question, but a question for y'all to be thinking about. How can we influence, because this is an economic and a markets policy issue, how can we begin to, as we do this, keep in mind that we're going to begin to influence marketers. We're going to begin to influence the marketplace and businesses who want to put their products before us. And I'm not sure what they're going to do about that. I'm not sure how marketers are going to change for introducing us and giving us the opportunity to see what their product is, and giving us the opportunity to maybe want that product without making us unhappy. But I think as we begin to wise up to that message, then we will hopefully be less interested in the means of communication who figured out, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, that the best way to get us to do stuff is to tell us we're unhappy. So I encourage y'all to think about that, when you get that question, you're like, how are we going to influence that marketplace to stop telling us we're unhappy all the time?
Anyone want to respond to that?
Why don't we just take a few more questions? I think
Sure.
we've talked so much.
Thank you.